Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. This marks our 100th episode, and we want to thank you for tuning in, whether this is your first time or 100th time. As always, we feature fresh and insightful interviews with one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. Please subscribe and catch our next 100 episodes by going to iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're enjoying The Director's Cut, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. We love hearing your feedback. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Andy Serkis' new film, Breathe, which tells the inspiring true story of Robin and Diana Cavendish, who are determined to live their lives to the fullest after Robin is confined to a hospital bed by polio at the age of 28 and given only a few months to live. While Breathe is Mr. Serkis' feature directorial debut, he also directed the second unit work on Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy, An Unexpected Journey, The Desolation of Smaug, and The Battle of the Five Armies. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Serkis spoke with director Matt Reeves about filming Breathe. During their conversation, Mr. Serkis explains how he communicated the British stoicism of the characters, his desire to maintain Robin's respirator as an integral component of the character's journey, and how his roots as a sketch artist were useful in preparing to direct.
This is such a pleasure for me because Andy and I have spent the past 5 years together, and I can tell you that he is such an incredible artist and such a beautiful person, and it's no surprise to me that this film is as beautiful as it is, Andy, because you are just such an incredible person. And anyway,
Thanks.
I love you. Anyway, this film has a very I don't know what people know or not, so we should talk about this. It has a very particular history, which is that your partner, your partner in your company, the Imaginarium, is Jonathan Cavendish. So, who is the son in this story? So it's a very, very personal story, and I wonder if you could talk about how this came to be made and how you guys developed the project, and also the sensitivity of that, given what a personal story it was for him, and how you navigated all that.
So Jonathan Cavendish and I, Jonathan's been a producer for many, many years. He produced Bridget Jones' Diary, Croupier, Elizabeth the Golden Age, a number of British films, some with working title. And we joined forces in around 2011. We formed a company called the Imaginarium, which is a performance capture studio with a production entity joined. So it was a functioning performance capture studio. So for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure you do, using technology to allow actors to play digital avatar characters. So we were setting up a slate of films for me to direct, and using Jonathan's immense producerial experience, bring a slate together of films, not just for performance capture, but I suppose what we were really intending to do with this place was to look at storytelling, the nature of storytelling, and how it might change over the next 10, 20, 30 years' time. So we wanted to examine how we could bring story not only into film, but into TV, into video game, into virtual reality, into augmented reality, and also live stage work, where we'd bring performance capture into that world too. There were a number of projects that he brought to the table, and one of them was this film. And I read the script one night as we were amassing all our projects, and I actually knew that there was a story of his father that he'd been talking about. But I read this script, which was written by Bill Nicholson, and he'd been developing it for about 4 or 5 years, and it was I think it was one of the most extraordinary scripts I've ever read as an actor or director. It was this incredible combination of being emotionally very powerful, of course, but it also had this extraordinarily this energy and upbeat attitude towards catastrophe, which I just found so powerful. And So I went in the next day and I said, look, Jonathan, I know that at that time we were setting up films like Animal Farm and Jungle Book, and I'd just come back from directing the second unit on The Hobbit with Peter Jackson. And I said, look, I know that I'm more used to directing orcs and elves and dwarves and animals of the jungle, but how do you fancy me having a crack at directing a film about your parents? And and he said, okay, let's do it. Absolutely, let's do it. And so one of the things I found inspiring about his parents' story was this idea that they were pioneers, really. That they were inadvertent pioneers. They weren't disabled rights activists. They happened to be people. When Diana says to Robin in the film, "What can I do to make your life better?" and he says, "Get me out of here." For me, it was like, when I read that in the script, it was like put me on the top of Mount Everest, or take me to the moon. It was the idea of living outside of hospital with that amount of disability was an impossibility. And so for me, I thought these people are, not only are they smiling in the face of catastrophe, but they're creating a whole new way of living, and living 2 minutes away from death with this intensity and this beautiful kind of attitude toward, once he came out of hospital, he really did have this incredibly positive attitude towards life. This is all coupled with the fact that I grew up in an environment where my mother was a teacher of disabled kids, and I grew up with children who had polio and spina bifida and thalidomide, and was watching my mum deal with trying to normalize them and bring them out of, to try and destroy the stigma attached to being disabled in the 60s and 70s. And as it happens, my sister then contracted, in her 20s, multiple sclerosis and is wheelchair bound. So I was looking at her in 2016 thinking, it's difficult enough for you to get around in 2016, 17. How must it have been for these guys in the 1960s and 70s when they were literally trying to exist outside of the safe hospital environment? So I really responded to that. That's what drew me to the project. Ultimately, it was this staring death in the face and not just triumph over adversity, but existing with a kind of wit and
is that
humor.
When I first saw the film, one of the first things you said to me was you were curious how I responded to it, and because I'm not British, and you said this is a very British film, which I found so interesting because I found it incredibly moving. I mean, as you know, my father passed away not that long ago, and upon seeing the film, those scenes especially, he was bedridden for a very long time, and those scenes especially really just tore at me. And such a beautiful spirit, the way you found humor in those moments, and I know that was their spirit. But is that what you mean when you say, like, what was it when you were asking me that question about the difference culturally? This idea, is it the idea of staring it in the face in a kind of brave way, or what is it about that? Why do you think this is a British tone?
It's interesting because whether it's partly British, but it's also a product of their generation, maybe partly to do with it. But there's a stoicism and a sort of the non-discussion of emotion that actually, when I read the script, made me feel incredibly emotional because it wasn't being extruded and brought out and on the page, or in fact in the performances in the film. It's very buttoned down. The emotion is very buttoned down, which allows the reader, or now the audience, hopefully, to make that emotional connection. So that's what I suppose what I meant. And now whether that's a cultural thing, I don't know. But I think. I mean, I'm not that. I'm the opposite of that. I'm a very outwardly emotional person, as you well know.
You sure are.
And and I know that. I mean, I have Middle Eastern roots, and I have quite a kind of fiery, kind of open nature. And I suppose there is a potentially, I think, a British kind of stoicism which does completely not embrace emotion, actually, and therefore whereas I think actually here, I think people are generally, I think the States, I think, and which is why I asked you that question.
Yeah.
I think people are used to seeing more emotion, and in fact, interestingly, that's one of the responses to the film is this couldn't possibly have happened. These people couldn't possibly have been that upbeat.
Yeah.
These people couldn't possibly have, and the fact of the matter is they did exist like that.
Well, when you see the image of them, the images of them at the end, it's sort of immediately, the footage shows them in a very, it's just in moments in life, and it gives it this tone where you realize, oh, that was all absolutely the way it was, which was just very, very, they embraced it, and they just said, okay, this is what it is, and here we are together. And It was really, I found that very moving. The tone of what it's interesting when you say, like, this couldn't have happened in terms of the tone and that kind of stuff, but what really struck me at the beginning of the film, and I thought what you did with Robert Richardson was just beautiful. Like, it was very beautifully choreographed, and the opening, I thought it felt almost like a musical is not the right term, but it had a very, I'm wondering about the tone in terms of what your references were, and how you enter it in such a way that when that, obviously I didn't know, even though I think you may have told me, I didn't somehow connect it to Jonathan's story. So when I saw the film and all of a sudden that moment happens where you suddenly realize, oh, this is going to turn very dark, I was sort of stunned. I was like, oh my God, this is not the ride I was expecting. And it was really, and yet it ended up being the ride that I expected after that, because the tone does come back. And so I wonder if you could talk about how you were developing the way into the film and the tone of that, and the way you worked with Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely did not want to make, and neither was it written in that way, because there was humour in the script. I did not want to make a sort of mawkish, sentimental, very dark, dour tale of disability, because that absolutely did not reflect the energy and essence of Diana and Robin's life. Their response was this vibrancy and this wit. I think wit is the kind of word that really for me sums up their love combined with wit, and how that rippled out across all that cabal of, really the close family, the cabal of kind of crazy, eccentric boho toffs that they kind of surrounded themselves with, all of whom are real people, and I've met some of them, and their lives were incredibly validated by Robin and Diana's essence and energy. And so I wanted that to be the spirit of the film, and the colour and the palette and the tone and the vibrancy, I suppose, is the word. So when Bob came over to I mean, it's so amazing that Robert Richardson came over. I mean, Robert has worked with Scorsese and Tarantino and Oliver Stone, and he loved this script because he'd never made a movie that had a very strong central female role in it. It was all very, incredibly
and she's
male.
So wonderful in the film.
And Claire is extraordinary in it, and it's and he was immensely collaborative and sort of saw what I was trying to do. So you're right. The opening was, as was in real life, it was a whirlwind romance. They met within 6 weeks. They'd fallen in love, decided to live together, decided to go to Africa and start a new life together. So we wanted to start it as if it were a fairy tale. And I was using the sort of the tropes of a 1960s romantic movie. In fact, all of the locations in England are exactly where Chitty Chitty Bang Bang was shot. And I wanted that kind of English eccentricity, that sort of Caractacus Potts meets Diving Bell and the Butterfly, that was what I wanted. I wanted to enliven it with that sort of British eccentricity and ingenuity and Heath Robinson approach to life, which is so that we all those locations were literally. I mean, there's a windmill in the scene on the hill. And that's the Caractacus Potts windmill from Chitty Bang Bang. So, and a lot of the shots of them driving around when the opening shots of him driving around were literally where Chitty Bang Bang was shot. So that was the tone. That was, and it's not a kind of. I mean, it is a layer. It is a layer, but it's a layer that accesses. I think, on what I intended to do was to access that colour and vibrancy, and even the costume designs, even everything, all the way through the way that we framed it, the aspect ratio, trying to give it as much scale as possible. I mean, the sort of film falls into the whirlwind romance, which again was inspired by by Up, even trying to tell that story in a very condensed way, because you don't really need to know much more than the fact is they fall in love until really the inciting incident, of course, is the polio. So and then Robin did fall into a Great Depression for a year and a half, where he wanted someone to switch the machine off, where he did want to die, where he was not interested at all in living, and that all changed literally when they broke out of hospital. And as also the dialogue in the movie, a lot of it is verbatim. 40% of what is said in the movie is actually dialogue. The consultant actually said, "You're going to die within 2 weeks." No, Diana actually said, "We're not going to keep Robin alive for the sake of his friends." There's lots of lines in the script that Bill Nicholson researched with the family that are actually verbatim. But we didn't want to sort of make it a leaden film about dramatizing this life. It was very much about trying to honor the essence of what they were about, which are these incredible mavericks. They were true mavericks, actually.
And in terms of your relationship with Jonathan, now, how was that? Was he on the set when you were shooting? How was that navigated? This must have been a very surreal experience for him. I mean, I'm just curious about how that works, given how personal the story was to him, and how did you guys interact during the making of the film, during the editing of the film?
I mean, again, both Diana's around, and she's a very, very good friend of mine, and his mother, and Jonathan too. So Jonathan was around and was on set and was watching everything being shot, and was incredibly objective about it, as you might. As sort of the essence of both of those people comes through in the film. Then they were not sort of. I mean, Diana. It was very funny when Diana watched the film for the first time. She watched it and she didn't let Jonathan or I go in and watch it with her. She wanted to watch it on her own effort. She watched it with a friend, actually. And we were waiting outside, and the first thing she came out, she said, "Well, I never would have worn that hat." And that was her response. I mean, it's like she's just watched this extraordinarily sort of kind of visceral movie about her life story, and that was her response. And that's what they were like, and that's what Jonathan was like on set.
So, like, for example, that scene, where he's saying goodbye to his father. I mean, I would imagine, one of the more emotional moments of his life. Was he there when you were shooting that?
Yeah,
and how does
there.
How did that affect, like, Andrew and just, I mean, and everyone? Who's the actor who plays his son?
Dean Charles Chapman.
Yes. Same thing. I mean,
the fact is, Jonathan was so generous about look, this is a story. Ultimately, I'm now a film producer and I'm making a film, and this is the story. Yes, it's of my parents' life, but there was in no way was there any sort of preciousness about it. He trusted me to tell the tale in the way that I wanted to do it, but at the same time, we collaborated fully, and because there was this, and again, the family having watched the movie, this essential emotional truth about the way that they went about things. Everybody felt it was very authentic, I think, to how it was. So there was no, again, that sort of buttoning down of emotion was there, even with Jonathan by my side as we were making the movie. Right. He only ever walked away from the monitors once to gather himself, I think, literally. And we had. And
what was that moment? Do you remember?
I think it was the scene on the hillside when
once he makes the decision.
He's saying, "I'm going to check out." Yeah. I think it was that was the moment. Yeah. I mean, he was amazing. But and Diana came down to visit, but she found it very boring after about 2 minutes.
Well, if she stuck around, she could have fixed the hat situation. So the in terms of how it, I mean, so this is you did so much work directing for Peter Jackson, and actually this film you shot after you shot your next movie, which was Jungle Book, and now you're finishing that movie now, and then this. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the transition, which you'd been making for years, from the position of being the incredible actor that you are to now the wonderful director that you are, and how that works. I mean, how you when you're approaching what you do, from what perspective are you coming? I mean, on this film, Jungle Book, and how many days did you shoot on The Hobbit? I mean, it was like over 100, wasn't it?
It was 200 days. 200 days.
That's more time than our entire schedule for the Planet of the Apes movie. So, I mean, it's amazing. So,
I mean, look, the thing is, what I didn't do was I didn't get to do the kind of the auteur small movie experience, because I was about to do that. I was about to make a small film.
But this is that.
And but not first.
Right.
Because my first experience was, most directors, you have the film that you really want to tell, and that you craft, and you've been burning to tell that story, and you make it with a few friends, and you've got 20 days to shoot it, and
Right.
you do that, right? So my first experience of actually directing was with a crew of 150 people, and for 200 days shooting 12 dwarves, a wizard, orcs galore, and
how did that come about? How did Peter
shots.
He was like, well, I need to do this for me.
He basically asked me, because he said, look, you're coming back to reprise the role of Gollum, and I really want an actor to take control of the second unit, because we're going to be exchanging. They're going to be coming to you all the time, and I want someone to look after performance. Which was an amazing thing. And then I had a great crew and fantastic DOP and everybody. And it was like the most incredible film education that you can imagine. It was just the sheer, we were shooting at 48 frames a second, native 3D, 150 crew, massive, big setups every single day. It was a trial by fire, believe me. But it was an amazing education, and I can't thank him enough for it. So that was part of it. But also, sort of before that, I'd started to make short films, and I'd come back from making King Kong with Peter Jackson, and found myself being asked to direct performance capture for video games. And so the way I went about it was, this is a drama, and so I cast great actors, and we rehearsed it, and we rehearsed.
Was your rehearsal period? Did you have because I know the film came together actually quite quickly, right? Because you had been wanting to do this,
right?
And then you made Jungle Book, and then all of a sudden, Jungle Book was sort of in post and in various stages or whatever, and you just had this opportunity to suddenly, in the middle of that project, that you're still finishing, make this.
That's right. That was literally how it happened. So we'd shot everything on Jungle Book. We shot principal photography, as you say. We'd gone into this lengthy period of post, as you know, with performance capture, which is a very painstaking, and there was this sort of hiatus period for two reasons. One, that we were perfecting our facial pipeline to translate actors from like Christian Bale, to make Christian Bale into a panther, and Cate Blanchett into a snake, and Benedict Cumberbatch into a tiger. Well, actually, that didn't take very long. And But in amongst all of that, of course, there was the other movie. There was the Disney version, and we thought it sensible to create a bit more space between the two movies. And then this window of opportunity came up with Andrew and Claire, and so we actually, I don't know how we did it actually, but we raised the money in 7 weeks. At Cannes, we went there. We had Andrew and Claire on board. We went to Cannes. We raised the money, and then we shot. So we were raising the money as we were in pre-production. Wow. So we had 7 weeks to raise the money, get into pre-production, and then we had 7 weeks to shoot it. Yeah. So it was and then.
So then you didn't have a long rehearsal period prior to shooting then.
No,
right?
we had Andrew came on board, and we started to talk about things for a long period. But then Andrew and Claire together, we had a week's rehearsal before we shot.
And how did that work? Like, what would you do? Do you just tape things out and just sort of like, let's talk through scenes, or what does a rehearsal look like for?
Well, it was they had to get to know each other very quickly, but they both sort of fell in love with each other and trusted each other from the word go, which was amazing to watch. I mean, it is all about chemistry, and they just adored each other and really made a pact that they would really trust each other, and they did. So we went through every single scene chronologically in the film, and we rehearsed it. And part of it was getting
rehearsed it on speaking.
We went
to
all the locations and
okay.
actually worked in the where we could, worked like in the Oxford Hospital, at the house, And
was Bob Richardson with you, or was it just
No. I went and worked with them, just me and them, and then Bob came. He would join later on and come, and then we'd do sort of block throughs with stand-ins.
Right. And would you take stills, or would you just
Yeah, we took lots of stills.
And this was a short period of time.
Very short period of time.
Right. And then by the time you were ready to shoot, you then revisited and then just went in and shot.
And we shot quite a lot of it in chronological order. we tried to keep that, just to give him a chance, because obviously the ticking clock in all of this is baby Jonathan growing up and all of that. And we just thought to give them a chance of, Andrew had to learn how to use a respirator, and we wanted the respirator to be lots of different characters, really, so that the first respirator was this machine that's driving him. And sounds very aggressive. It almost sounds like Darth Vader. We wanted it to be a character, It was like a really aggressive sound. And then he had to learn to speak in rhythm. And in real life, Robin had this extraordinary thing that he used to do, because he didn't like people finishing his sentences for him, because a respirator would only pump enough air into your lungs to get through half a sentence, and then it would have to refill. So he used to always, when it came to the end of his sentence, he'd slightly change a word so that you couldn't quite guess what he was going to say next, which allowed him to then get enough air into his lungs to pick up where he needed to pick up and carry on.
Wow.
So Andrew was learning all of that, and also it was like a third character in the room. So Claire had to learn how to respond to him over the sound of a respirator, whilst he was learning to speak. So it was a complex kind of.
Was there any kind of research or reference in terms of this kind of speaking for Andrew to be?
Yeah, I mean there's lots of video footage of Robin speaking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so Andrew kind of really imbibed all of that, and he worked so hard. I mean, he really did work.
They were both so wonderful.
Yeah, amazing. And just to take someone as physical as, Andrew is a incredibly physical actor, and to have Spider-Man and Queen Elizabeth II kind of act opposite each other was quite extraordinary. Now we took all of that physical energy that he had and robbed him of it, and then had it all migrate into Robin's face, which is actually what Robin's face was like. It was this.
He had this amazingly expressive smile that he would do. Was that from? Yeah. Was any of that in the video? Like he would do, his face would light up in this very particular way.
Absolutely, and that's again what Andrew really studied, and of course, because his field of view was so limited, because it depends where his chair would have been put in a room. He had this extraordinary thing where his eyes would would almost try and look round the corner of where he was placed. And Diana the real Diana used to put once Robin was out of hospital, she wanted to help him regain his sense of dignity, but of manhood. So she would actually allow him to. She would if there was a social situation, she would always place him in a power position in a room, so that he could make people feel at home. And the one thing he wanted to do is in order to smash these preconceptions of being disabled, because, as I say, no one lived outside of the hospital system at that time. He wanted to put people at ease. He always wanted to make people feel, and Andrew really got that. I think he really did that.
And what about, just briefly, your collaboration with Bob Richardson? I just think the film is so beautiful. Like, how did you guys work together? I mean, just what was your relation? I know obviously it was a great relationship, but what was that process like?
It was
like you'd rehearse a scene and
he would watch. There were certain scenes that the amazing thing about him was that he's worked with so many great directors, and yet he's an most collaborative DOP, really phenomenally collaborative, and the other thing I really truly loved and admired about him is that he's an operator as well. So he would ride a crane, and so he's intimately involved with the feel of what the performance. He truly was in there with the performances, and so his subtle movement with the camera and dancing around what was going on was extraordinary. So I had a kind of an overall very clear vision, and I'd storyboarded a lot of shots. But then,
so tell me about that. So you would storyboard. Who did you worked with an artist?
I did a lot of them, but myself. Oh,
and that's the other thing that we should mention too, is that before you were an actor, you were an artist. You never thought you were going to be an actor, right? And so you would sketch these out, or you had a book of these drawings.
Yeah.
And did you start that process when you were doing what you were doing on The Hobbit, or like when did you?
I've even back as far as like making short films and things. Yeah, I mean, I've always.
So you would show Bob, okay, so I was kind of thinking about something like this, and then
and he would totally get it, and then he would add to it, and he would make it 10 times better, and it was just, I mean, he really for all his wealth of experience, he always deferred ultimately to the director's decision, and I found that really humbling, actually, that he would do that, and yet he did. It was. I think we only really came to blows once, and
did you? And what was it about?
Well, no, it was. It was really late.
You and
on
I have
in the
never
shoot.
come to blows.
No, I know. It wasn't even coming to blows. It was just. I think it was just exhaustion and tiredness, and just a difference of opinion. It was in some of the Africa stuff. Oh, I know what it was. It was the shot where Diana, when he says. No, I know what it was. Exactly what it was. It was the shot where she says, "I'm going to have a baby," and then he puts his foot on the brakes. But the shot, we were really pressed for time, and he wanted to mount the camera on the Jeep in a particular way, and I said, "Look, let's follow the car," and he wanted to mount it on the, It was just like that was the big
filmmaking,
like
exactly. The realities of time and all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Andy, thank you so much.
Matt,
thank you so much. This is a pleasure talking to you. And
thank you,
Andy Serkis,
Matt Reeves.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. Don't forget, you can check out past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date on the great discussions we have coming up. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.